The first time my parents mentioned Daniel's name, I barely looked up from my laptop. "I think we've found someone you'd really like," my mother said as she placed a cup of tea in front of me. I smiled politely. "I'm not looking to date anyone right now." Dad folded his newspaper. "You're 31. You're not getting any younger." I had heard that sentence so many times that it no longer surprised me. For the past 3 years, nearly every family gathering ended with the same conversation. "When are you getting married? Don't focus so much on work. A good husband is more important than a successful career." I never argued. I simply changed the subject. "My name is Hannah Brooks. I worked as an architect for one of the city's fastest-growing design firms. I loved creating spaces where people could build memories. Design wasn't just my profession. It was my passion. Long hours never bothered me because every completed project reminded me why I had chosen this career." My parents, however, saw things differently. To them, professional success meant very little if I remained unmarried. Over the following weeks, they mentioned Daniel constantly. "He owns a successful business. He's financially secure. He comes from a respected family." Finally, one evening, I asked the obvious question. "If he's such a wonderful man, why is he divorced?" The room became unusually quiet. Mom answered first. "His first marriage simply didn't work." Dad nodded. "Sometimes people marry the wrong person." I accepted that explanation. After all, divorce alone doesn't define someone's character. Everyone deserves a second chance. A few days later, they arranged a dinner so Daniel and I could meet. He arrived exactly on time wearing an expensive suit and an even more expensive watch. At first glance, he appeared charming, confident, successful. He complimented the restaurant, ordered for both of us without asking what I wanted, then smiled as though he'd done me a favor. During dinner, he talked almost exclusively about himself, his investments, his luxury cars, his vacation homes, his business connections. Whenever I tried discussing architecture or my latest project, he interrupted within seconds. Finally, he leaned forward. "I've always believed a wife shouldn't have to work." I smiled politely. "I enjoy my career." "You'll enjoy staying." The dinner ended in complete silence. My parents believed time would eventually change my mind. They assumed I would realize that Daniel's wealth, successful business, and comfortable lifestyle mattered more than my doubts. They were wrong. The following week, my mother called almost every day. "Just meet him once. He's different than people say. You shouldn't judge someone because he's divorced." I agreed with one part of that statement. A divorce alone doesn't define a person's character. People can leave unhealthy marriages for many valid reasons. That wasn't why I hesitated. What concerned me was that every time I asked why both marriages had ended, the answers kept changing. The first wife wasn't supportive. The second one wanted too much freedom. He simply had bad luck. No one ever accepted that he might have played a role in the failures. That made me uneasy. Finally, just to end the constant pressure, I agreed to have coffee with Daniel. We met at an upscale restaurant on a Saturday afternoon. He arrived 15 minutes late without apologizing. Instead of asking about my work or interests, he spent the first 20 minutes talking about himself. He described his expensive cars, his vacation homes, his business deals. Several times he reminded me how fortunate any woman would be to marry someone financially secure. Then he looked directly at me. "If we get married, I expect my wife to stop working." I blinked. "I'm sorry. My children should be raised by their mother. My wife won't need a career." I smiled politely. "I actually love my career." He shrugged. "You'll outgrow that." A few minutes later, the waitress accidentally placed the wrong drink on the table. Instead of calmly asking for the correct order, Daniel spoke sharply enough for nearby tables to hear. "Can anyone here do their job properly?" The young waitress apologized immediately. She looked embarrassed. I quietly thanked her when she returned with the correct drink. Daniel laughed. "You're too nice. If people don't fear disappointing you, they'll walk all over you." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. When lunch ended, he smiled confidently. "I'll tell our parents we got along well." I answered honestly. "I don't think we're a good match." His smile disappeared. "I don't think you've thought carefully." "I have." My answer is no. He stood without another word and walked away. That evening, my parents were waiting for me. "So?" my mother asked hopefully. I took a deep breath. "I won't marry him." Dad frowned. "Why?" "Because we want completely different lives." Mom sighed. "Relationships require compromise." I agree. But compromise isn't giving up your identity before the marriage even begins. My father became frustrated. You're being stubborn. No, I'm protecting my future. For several weeks, my parents barely spoke to me. Family gatherings became uncomfortable. Some relatives hinted that I was becoming too independent. Others warned me that good opportunities didn't come twice. I thanked them politely and continued living my life. Nearly 2 years passed. My career flourished. I was promoted to senior architect and eventually became a partner in my firm. I loved designing affordable housing projects that helped young families buy their first homes. One afternoon, while attending an industry conference, I met Michael. He was a civil engineer working on the same development project. Our first conversation lasted almost an hour. Not once did he ask how much I earned. Not once did he tell me how I should live. Instead, he asked about my ideas, my dreams, the books I enjoyed reading. He listened more than he spoke. Over the next year, our friendship slowly became something deeper. When Michael proposed, he said, "I don't want someone to complete my life. I want someone whose dreams I can walk beside." Those words brought tears to my eyes. A year after our wedding, my parents came to visit. During dinner, my mother quietly admitted something. "Do you remember how upset we were when you refused Daniel?" I smiled. "I remember." She lowered her eyes. "We heard he divorced again." I looked surprised. "A third divorce?" She nodded. This time his former wife publicly described how controlling he had become. Dad sighed heavily. "I wish we had listened when you tried to explain your concerns." I reached across the table and held his hand. "I know you wanted what you believed was best for me." He nodded. "But wanting the best isn't enough. We should have trusted you to recognize what was best for yourself." Months later, my younger cousin asked me for advice. Her family was pressuring her into a relationship she didn't feel comfortable pursuing. She looked nervous. "What if everyone thinks I'm making a mistake?" I smiled. "Sometimes disappointing other people is the price of being honest with yourself." She thought quietly for a moment. "So saying no doesn't make me selfish?" "No. It makes you responsible for your own life." Years later, my parents often told friends a very different story from the one they once believed. They no longer said they had almost found me the perfect husband. Instead, they admitted they had nearly convinced me to ignore my instincts. Looking back, people often focused on the fact that the man my parents wanted me to marry had already gone through 2 divorces and later experienced another failed marriage. But that wasn't the real lesson. The real lesson was that no parent, relative, or friend can live with the consequences of your marriage except you. Advice can be valuable. Experience can be helpful. But the final decision belongs to the person who must build that life every single day. Sometimes the bravest word you can say is no. And sometimes that single word protects the future you were meant to have.